today we road test a very affordable Citroen electric hatchback, drive the Mahindra Thar two-wheel drive and check out the Moto Morini Seiemmezzo. Hello and welcome to Overdrive. I am Soini Dutt. Citroen has unveiled their very first affordable electric hatchback in the country, the C3. Now the eC3 will be the second mainstream electric offering for India after the Tiago EV. It will suit your pocket and it promises an ARAI certified driving range of 320 kilometers. To win us all the details.
Now you might be wondering what we're doing driving the Citroen C3 all over again. But that's not quite right, is it? Because this is in fact the Citroen eC3, the newest affordable EV you can buy in the country right now. The Citroen eC3 uses a 29.2 kWh LFP battery pack, which gives it 320 kilometers of ARAI range. Now this should be good for about 240 to 260 kilometers in the real world, since we saw 220 kilometers on the readout with about 96% charge left. Notably, this battery pack is naturally cooled with passing air, unlike most of the liquid-cooled setups you currently see. The battery pack can function between minus 10 to 55 degrees Celsius and also ford water without trouble, although an IP rating isn't mentioned. Otherwise, the pack can withstand nail penetration as well. Now the eC3 can charge it up to 30 kilowatts of DC fast charging, and Citroen says that you don't need to keep alternating between DC and AC charging to preserve the battery. Just on DC charging the Citroen will still be fine. Now as for AC charging, it only accepts 3.3 kilowatt, which is a bit less, but you can also charge it from a home socket in about 10.5 hours. Now we're driving the eC3 around quite a short track, so our impressions of how the car has to drive are quite preliminary. But it must be said that the 57 PS and the 143 Newton meter that this car makes, it's quite a bit less than its petrol counterparts, but it never feels inadequate. So with that crisp EV torque delivery, you always seem to make easy progress, as is true for most EVs, even though in this case it's not quite that sharp, really, jerky acceleration that you come to expect in certain EVs. It's much more natural, it builds progressively. And Citroen says that the eC3 will do 0 to 60 in 6.8 seconds, which seems fair, and it will go up to a 107 kmph top speed. It's limited, but it must be said that the eC3 does get up to 107 kmph reasonably easily. We can't tell you how this electric eC3 rides in regular Indian conditions, but on track the sense of solidity that comes through in the ICE version seems to have been retained. It's still got nearly that same well-judged steering feel and still handles in that progressive, predictable manner that makes it quite easy to use in traffic or around corners. The added weight is apparent, of course, but like most EVs, the low center of gravity does counter that effect to an extent. Now another trait that we've started to like is the way switch from delivering power to slowing down to regen quite naturally. There is no abruptness, no sort of hesitation, and the regen level also varies with the speed. You can't choose, you can't select a specific regen level, but say at higher speeds above 80 or above 70, there's less regen just like you would want on the highway, and then at lower city speeds there's quite a bit of regen. There's no one pedal driving, so you won't come to a complete halt, but you will slow down to say a 7 or 8 kilometer per hour crawl. So as with most EVs, the eC3 is quite good to drive. It's not the most exciting EV, but it must be said that for a small city car, it gets the job done really quite well. Now, like we mentioned, you can choose between a standard and an eco mode. Now, the eco mode will reduce torque outputs. It's not just to reduce throttle response, so it reduces the torque to about 120 Newton meter, and Citroen says that will give you about 10 to 11% more range, which is a good deal, we'd suppose. You'd be hard pressed to spot the Citroen eC3 from the ICE version. There's still a grille just like the petrol version, possibly for the naturally cooled battery, so the only differentiator is the new dual tone paint options and the small E badges that dot the fenders. There has been a 10 mm drop in ground clearance to 170 mm with the new battery pack. Now on the inside, the EC3 is near identical to the regular petrol powered C3, but of course there are some differences. For example, you get this toggle type selector which is quite heavily inspired from the one in the C5 Aircross, the facelifted one. There's no park mode, which is a bit of a miss, but what you do get is an eco drive mode. So that should help you eke out extra range when, say, you're low on power and so on and so forth. Now you get a slightly different digital instrument cluster with the electric C3. Now it's the same basic unit as the petrol C3, but it's to a black background, so it looks a touch classy, a bit better integrated. And there is a bit more information on offer. For example, you now have a clear readout between the power and the regen level, unlike, say, the missing tachometer in the petrol C3. But other than that, it's still quite bare in its information. So you just get a charge level readout, a range readout, and the 2 trip computers. There's still no efficiency readout, so that is still something that Citroen could have worked on. Now a few more minor differences separate the EC3 from the petrol C3. To start with, the seats, they now have this black seat cover instead of the off-whitish one that you found in the petrol C3. You finally get a day-night rear view mirror, which was a stark miss in the petrol version. And this 10-inch touchscreen, it already had that wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay connectivity. Now it adds connected tech features to it. Of course, they're phone-based, but now they do have been added.
Usefully, boot space hasn't been compromised. It's still 315 litres with a spare wheel provided for good measure.
Now in terms of how the EC3 feels in the backseat, things are somewhat similar to the petrol version, but not quite. So what is similar is that you have that same quite comfortable and wide bench with the same nice angle of recline and the very well thought out cushioning. But what is different is that the floor is a bit higher, of course, now to put in the battery, which sits here before the boot. So which means that you sit in a bit of a knees up position. It's not quite as comfortable as in the petrol C3. As you can see, there's not that much thigh support. So yeah, you are losing out a bit of comfort, but it must be said that as far as EVs go, this is really not bad at all.
The Citroen EC3 carries on in the mold of the C3. It's got a sound EV powertrain, useful range for a city runabout, and the sense of space and comfort that Citroen does so well with the petrol version. We would have liked more equipment again, but we hope Citroen gets the pricing right. Our hope is a rupees sub 10 lakh entry price to fully capitalize on the fairly sparse playing field that the Citroen EC3 has to itself in the EV space.
Well, in our estimation, Citroen will be pricing the EC3 between 10 to 12 lakh rupees, and that will certainly make things very interesting in this affordable EV space. We'll take a very quick break here on the show, but coming up on the other side, we'll tell you all about the Mahindra two-wheel drive. Welcome back here with us on Overdrive. Now, Mahindra Thar has been extremely popular ever since it entered the Indian market in 2020. The brand has received over 80,000 bookings ever since its launch, and now the brand has decided that it's time to widen its appeal given that there is a lot of competition around the corner. So in comes the Mahindra Thar two-wheel drive.
So far, the Mahindra Thar has been your only real choice in the mainstream segment if you wanted a car that fully drives home that outdoorsy lifestyle of yours. But that's set to change soon with the Maruti Suzuki Jimny right around the corner in India. So Mahindra have reacted to that already, and you now have this, the Mahindra Thar two-wheel drive. It gets, of course, a two-wheel drive powertrain and a smaller engine. So what is it really like? Let's find out. The Mahindra Thar has always been under 4 meters long. So with this new 1.5 litre motor now being fitted to it, the off-roader can claim the sub 4 meter tax benefits. This should further drive down the Thar's price, opening up a whole new section of buyers. This diesel engine is a 1.5 turbo borrowed from the Marazzo, which makes 117 PS and 300 Nm. This is paired only with a 6-speed manual. The petrol engine option remains the same 2-litre M Stallion motor with its 150 PS and 320 Nm, and this can still be had with the automatic. Now this engine might be quite a bit smaller than the big 2.2 liter diesel that you don't get with the two-wheel drive Thar anymore. But it must be said that in terms of outputs, it's not that far behind. It's only 13 PS less and it makes the same exact amount of torque, which means that you don't really miss that big M-Hock engine all that much. Of course, what you do miss is that great top-notch, really high level of refinement and drivability that that engine gave you. But the trade-off is not bad at all. Of course, this engine is slightly noisier and you can feel a few more vibrations, but it must be said that the clutch actually feels lighter in this. And as Mahindra claims, 55% of that 300 Newton meters of torque is made just over idle at 1000 RPM, which means that in the city, where to be honest the Thar is really quite good as a city car considering how high you sit up and how easily you can see the edges of the car, it really does do a great job of just moving along in traffic. You can potter along it even in a high gear, it will keep holding revs. So yeah, there's always performance available to you. So in traffic, it's not really an issue. And this good demeanor in urban conditions is actually helped by the fact that the clutch doesn't feel quite as heavy and as snappy as it did with the 2.2 liter diesel. The gearbox has changed. It's a different 6-speed manual now. And yeah, we would have liked maybe slightly shorter throws. This one feels a bit too much like, you know, a big old MPV, but not in a bad way because the shifts themselves are reasonably precise. They're just really long and you sort of row through them like this. But yeah, it sort of goes with the whole demeanor of the Thar as, you know, that big rough SUV 4x4.
Another positive is the improved fuel economy. It's still not as good as a regular SUV, but we managed close to 10 kmpl in the city and 14 kmpl on the highway. You still get all-terrain tires, electronic brake rocking differential, ESP with rollover mitigation, hill hold and hill descent control. In any case, the Thar two-wheel drive will go further and take more beating than most SUVs. So it'll still be great as a weekend machine or if you need to reach remote places often. Without the full safety net of 4x4 of course for those especially tricky situations.
Now with the smaller, lighter engine in the front and with no 4x4, it has actually helped the Thar's, you know, handling character a little bit. Now the Thar was pretty decent with its highway manners, but it's now become a touch more alert, so you maybe don't sway and roll all that much as you used to before in the bigger Thar. But again, the changes are minimal. But other than that, the driving experience remains largely similar.
So the only change on the inside of the Mahindra Thar two-wheel drive is that the 4x4 shifter has now been replaced by a usefully large storage space. So you have a fairly wide and spacious cabin as before for the front passengers, although again the driver's footwell could have been less cramped. The Thar two-wheel drive can be had in both the AX optional and LX trim levels, so the features list remain unchanged as is the case with the safety credentials. The SUV also did quite well in our panic braking test, staying true to its line and feeling confident under heavy braking.
So how do you spot the Thar two-wheel drive from the regular 4x4 version? To start with, these sections of the bumpers in the front and at the back, the middle sections are now black, they're body colored, not the silver ones that you find in the 4x4 versions. Then behind, at the rear quarter panel, there's no 4x4 logo anymore. And also on this side where you have the M-Hock logo for the diesel, that's gone because now it's a CRDE engine that this one gets.
The Mahindra Thar two-wheel drive seems to do the job it has set out to. It could have done with a more refined motor, but despite losing the 4x4 gear, this is still very much a Thar. It gives you that same sense of indestructibility and most of the rough road capability. The slightly better on-road dynamics and mileage are an added bonus.
With prices starting from 10 lakh rupees, the Mahindra Thar two-wheel drive certainly is a very attractive choice for someone who is interested in cruising the highways most of the time, but also likes a bit of adventure over the weekends. We'll take a very quick break here on the show, but coming up on the other side, we'll tell you all about the Moto Morini Seiemmezzo 650cc motorcycle. Welcome back, you're watching Overdrive. Now yes, the 650cc Moto Morini Seiemmezzo does sound Italian, but is it a thoroughbred steed? Let's find out.
Now, when it comes to Italian motorcycles, many of you, like me, will have preconceived expectations because over the course of time, we have witnessed that these motorcycles that emanate from that particular part of the world not only are striking in terms of design, but when it actually gets down to getting out on the road, these bikes are ultimately engaging. So how much Italian DNA does the Seiemmezzo 6.5 have in its kitty? Well, we are here to find out. So let's get to it. On the looks front, we all know that Italian motorcycles generally do anything but blend in with the crowd. But with the Seiemmezzo 6.5, at least this retro street avatar, its design might not be overly outstanding, but it looks very neat overall. The round headlight with the LED halo, while not being very unique, does look attractive. And the bike does have a bold, solid look about it with the sturdy 43mm KYB upside down fork, the big muscular 15.5 litre tank, the tidy midsection with the exposed steel frame and the slightly contoured seat. Then you have Brembo disc brakes and chunky Pirelli Angel GT tires at both ends, the 18-inch front and the 17-inch rear. And while the taillight is located under the seat, the indicators at the back, like the number plate, are integrated with the tire hugger quite neatly. Now the Seiemmezzo 6.5 features 5-inch TFT display that's very easy to read on the go. And the best part about the screen is the way the numbers light up on the tacho the higher you climb up the band, which looks really cool. There are no ride modes or riding aids with this bike, apart from the ABS, dual channel of course, which can't be switched off. In terms of performance, well, the 649cc parallel twin doesn't make as much power as the competition in the form of the Kawasaki Z650, but it doesn't feel anything close to being sluggish. The engine is the same 649cc liquid-cooled parallel 12 unit from the Escape 650 Adventure motorcycle, but power output is down by 5 PS. So here, the motor makes a max of 55 PS of power and peak torque is around 54 Nm. The 8-valve DOHC unit is very refined in its method of functioning. Throttle response is smooth and you won't be caught off guard with any spiky surge of power during closed and open throttle transition. In terms of ride quality, the Seiemmezzo does strike a good balance between sport and comfort. The riding triangle is a comfortable one, and the suspension, although it doesn't kill off bumps completely at slow speed, does remove the sharpness from them. At higher speeds, this bike is very comfortable and predictable in its manner of functioning as well. But the quicker you go, the more comfy you and your pillion are going to feel on this bike. The front end does tend to dive down a fair bit under hard braking, but the best part is the front fork is adjustable, which allows you to change that around. In fact, the Seiemmezzo gets quite a good amount of familiar hardware in the form of KYB suspension at both ends, Brembo disc brakes at both ends as well, dual channel ABS from Bosch and Pirelli tires. Now exactly how much Italian DNA does the Seiemmezzo 6.5 have in its kitty? Well, in the true aspect of the sense, it does exude a lot of qualities that you would assume from an Italian brand and a motorcycle of this caliber. Well, it has a decent enough engine, a good ride and handling dynamics, and yes, it looks pretty nice as well. But I think the only crux of the matter is if you were to select this bike over the competition, the Z650 from Kawasaki and the Trident 660, the Triumph, the only thing that you should look out for is something like the sales and service network, because although the Seiemmezzo Moto Morini is operating out of the Moto Vault Arena, we are told that there are just 9 showrooms of Moto Vault Arena around the country. But the good thing is they are tied up with Benelli and Kibe. So they will have, if you own a Moto Morini motorcycle and you have a dealership, a Kibe or a Benelli dealership around the place nearby, well, you can get your bike serviced from those outlets. But that is something that you will definitely want to factor in before you buy a machine like this.
Well, that's it then from us on this week's edition of Overdrive. But remember, you can stay in touch with the team through Facebook, Twitter as well as YouTube. And you can follow our latest updates on Instagram. We'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.